Judy?
It is. We're still we're still not muted.
Everybody please stop talking.
Dr. Randall Maxey, Chief Medical Officer of Advanced Community Health Experts, to best serve our communities of color with a coalition of leading and long-standing Black medical professionals across a diverse spectrum of disciplines, to offer unvarnished opinions and insight into our physical and mental health during these challenging times. I want to share a few housekeeping items before we begin. Please be advised that the video conference is live and being recorded on different public platforms such as Facebook Live, and that participation in this call is purely voluntary. If you choose to participate on this call and prefer not to have your image and likeness displayed, you have the option to block your picture and mute your voice by changing video and audio settings on your device. Please be aware that when content is posted on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, speak, and then once again, when you are finished, please mute yourself. As for the chat room, we please ask you to limit your questions to 2 questions per topic being addressed, and please do not use the form to advertise or promote your product. We also ask you to understand that there may not be sufficient time to get all of your questions answered during the call, but we surely will do our best. We also asked you to please note that the information communicated in this call is not deemed to be medical or legal advice, and you should always consult your own medical or legal professional for advice regarding your personal matters. We want to give a big welcome to all of our distinguished physicians and special guests, and we thank you in advance for sharing your time and your information that you donate to this program to help our communities thrive. So for now, we ask Dr. Maxey to please begin moderating our today's program. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Black Health Trust weekly broadcast. So I want to give special thanks to our speakers. We have a distinguished panel of speakers today to present information that we believe is totally credible for communities of color. Let me start with a few things. As the host has said, we are not giving medical information. We are giving valid health advice. But before anything, you should talk with your health provider. That is very important to do that. Uh, I'm going to share my screen, hopefully. Well, I guess I'm not going to share my screen. Our speakers today are Dr. I'll call him doctor, but he's an admiral, a vice admiral. That means 3 stars. David Brewer, U.S. Navy retired. He graduated from not only Howard University, but he attended the first ROTC class at a traditional HBCU. He has a background and a history in nutrition. His father was a very well-known nutritionist uh, prior to him going into military service. I met him years ago when he was commander of the Pacific. I was based in Guam at that time as a dialysis doctor. He subsequently became commander of all of the Navy logistics worldwide, and in that job had command of the two Navy hospital ships, the Comfort and the Mercy. Subsequently, he became the superintendent of schools of the USD, which is the second largest school district in the United States. Uh, he's been a friend, uh, a leader for years, and I asked him to take the floor and speak to us about key issues of nutrition and health. I'll introduce the other speakers as they come. Dr. Brewer.
Thank you, Randall. Um, can everyone see that screen? Daily routine? Okay. All right. So, one of the things that happened to me about 12 years ago, 13 years ago, is we lost one of our first Naval ROTC classmates at the age of 57. And that was kind of a shock to us because he was such a young and viable man. And so I basically started on this journey of researching, nutrition as well as disease. And so over time, I've developed what I call a daily routine for me and my family. My wife and daughter are on the line today. And you will see I'm going to go through these as we go through the presentation. Let me make sure I can move this thing through. Okay. So let's start with sulforaphane. Green is queen. Cruciferous vegetables are some of the most nutritious vegetables that we can eat, and they really go after cancer big time. But the queen or the king of cruciferous vegetables is Brussels sprouts. They have 10 to 100 times more sulforaphane than broccoli, and when you heat the broccoli sprouts, they actually get 3 to 3.5 times more. But you can't heat them above 158 degrees because then you begin to kill the myrosinase, which is the enzyme that really releases the sulforaphane. But the good news is if you do that, then you can add mustard seed powder, which will reactivate the myrosinase. Now, here's why it's so important. When you look at what it really does, when it gets into the bloodstream, it really attacks the enzymes that cancer uses to silence our defense in terms of defending ourselves against cancer. So broccoli sprouts, I call it the chemotherapy of plant foods. And so it's extremely, extremely powerful. And so this is something that I eat, that my family and I eat on a daily basis. If you're in a therapeutic situation, you should probably consume about 10 ounces of this per day, no more than that. But it basically is a very, very powerful antioxidant. Okay, turmeric. Now, most of us are very familiar with turmeric. And of course, the active ingredient in turmeric is curcumin. But just as I majored, by the way, I majored in biology and chemistry in college. So I kind of understand this stuff. And one of the things I learned in biology and chemistry is something called synergism. In order to make things work, sometimes you have to put things together. For example, with turmeric, in order to get to the curcumin, which is the active ingredient, you must add black pepper and a fat or oil to enhance the absorption of curcumin. And curcumin also kills cancer cells. It's called apoptosis. And so unlike chemotherapy, however, it also preserves the good cells. Now, keep in mind that you have to really get this stuff in your system well before you get too far down the line in terms of any cancer. But turmeric is really a powerful antioxidant with the curcumin. Now, but one of the things I really like about turmeric is that it's good for your memory. And one of the things that I do in my research is I also study populations. When I can't find something through NIH or Dr. Greger, who runs nutritionfacts.org, which I think is a great website, I look at populations. And when you look at the populations around the world, it's rural India that has one of the lowest incidences of Alzheimer's in the world. In fact, there are 4 times fewer cases of Alzheimer's in India than there are in America. And one of the reasons for that is, first of all, they eat less meat, they eat more of a plant-based diet, and they consume a lot of turmeric. Okay, now I am a member of the greatest fraternity of all time, Alpha Phi Alpha, black and gold. But I have to give a shout out to my Omega brothers, because anthocyanins is one of the most powerful antioxidants, and it is purple. So this is why I say purple is gold. But the kingpin in the anthocyanins family, you got the blueberries, you got the blackberries, you got the dark grapes and all this stuff, is purple sweet potatoes. 150% more anthocyanins in purple sweet potatoes than blueberries. Now, again, I really kind of focused on this because of a population study. Because one of the staples in the rural Okinawan women's diet is purple sweet potatoes. Now, Okinawan women, Okinawa has 68 centenarians per 100,000, which is 3 times the number in the U.S. and even higher than in Japan. Now, that is changing now simply because the Okinawan children, the young people, have now discovered Kentucky Fried Chicken and McDonald's. But for the rural Okinawan women, they eat a lot of purple sweet potatoes. Now, you can find these basically in Whole Foods and several Asian stores throughout the country. Now, berries, I still don't give up on berries because berries are also good for your memory. Again, another study that I found in terms of slowing the brain aging process is that 16,000 women over time who consumed berries had their aging slowed by 2.5 years. Now, one of my favorite blends is I put it all together. I put purple sweet potatoes with skin, wild blueberries, dark purple grapes, acai pulp, dates, and hibiscus tea. Hibiscus tea is one of the highest antioxidant beverages on the planet. So I strongly recommend that you incorporate that into your diet. Now, since most of us are getting up there in age, lutein and zeaxanthin. They're great for your eyes, but they're also essential for your brain memory. And what they found was, when they looked into the eyes, they found that if you had a shortage of lutein in your eyes, obviously your eyesight was affected. But when they went down the optic nerve, they found that people who had a lack of lutein also were demented. So they were able to connect lutein to memory. The best vegetable for lutein and zeaxanthin is kale. The best way to get at the lutein and zeaxanthin is to steam your kale, but don't steam it more than 5 minutes. And one of the things here is that you'll find that the pigments are where the antioxidants are. The same thing with the purple. If you cook it and you all of a sudden you start to lose the pigments, then in essence you're losing the antioxidants. And one of the great things is that if you can get kids to eat it, kale is good for academic performance. But you can, because of the heat, it kills the myrosinase, but you can restore it with mustard seed powder, so you get a double whammy. You get the memory with the lutein and zeaxanthin, and you get the sulforaphane if you add mustard seed powder to it. Okay, for all the ladies, again, population studies, green tea and cooked mushrooms daily, an 80+% reduced risk of breast cancer. That's a population study. It was published in the International Journal of Cancer back in 2007. I can tell you right now that the women in my life of all green tea and mushroom eaters, because basically this is green tea, because of the ECGC, basically with the combination of mushrooms will reduce the risk of breast cancer. So that's a big tip for the day. Now, COVID. We take elderberry syrup every day. And one of the things that we do with our elderberry syrup, and here's the recipe, is that you will see on here Manuka honey. Manuka honey is antiviral. When we did the population study, you look at New Zealand, where Manuka honey is made. New Zealand, 5 million people. Georgia, 5 million people. New Zealand, 25 people dead. Georgia, over 6,000 dead. One of the things that they consume a lot of is Manuka honey, because it's antiviral. There are some clinical trials going on right now between black seed oil and honey to see if it will stop the virus. Now, what will stop the virus is a study that was just done with vitamin D. So we add vitamin D to our elderberry syrup, because the study that was just done, 76 people, double blind, 50 were given vitamin D therapeutic doses, and then 26 people were not given. The 50 people who were in the hospital, only one went into ICU. Of the 26 who did not get the vitamin D, 13 or half went in, and 2 died. Nobody died with the vitamin D. Now they're going to take this vitamin D therapeutics to another level. They want to do a much broader study. Now, arugula is one of my favorite vegetables. It's also a cruciferous vegetable. It's the highest nitric oxide food, good for blood flow. I always eat it before I exercise, and you can figure out what that other thing means up there about amorous activity. I think you can figure that out. Black seed oil is also something that's a part of our diet. We take the black seed oil with the Manuka honey. As you can see, it has a lot of antioxidants in it. It's good for hair, skin, but it's also good to protect your brain, etc. Now, this is something that I discovered a while back. My cholesterol was high because I was consuming too much coconut oil. So I stopped the coconut oil, and then I started eating 1 Brazil nut a day. My cholesterol dropped 60 points. 60 points from eating 1 Brazil nut a day. That's another good tip for you. Now, I'm going to wrap it up. This is our daily smoothie. As you'll notice, I do a lot of blending with my smoothies. So I do bone health, bok choy, tofu, almonds, prunes, vitamin D. Let's focus there for a minute, because almonds and prunes. Why would I put almonds and prunes in a bone blend? It's because of 2 things that happen to your body: osteoclast and osteoblast. Osteoclast is when your body scavenges your bone for calcium. Osteoblast is when they upload it to your bones. So prunes will regulate osteoclast, and almonds regulate osteoclast. In other words, it keeps your bone from scavenging too much calcium from your bones. And prunes upregulate calcium into your bones. And of course, vitamin D is also important there. As you can see, the broccoli sprouts are there, green tea, mushrooms, and of course, the purple passion and the purple sweet potatoes. So that's it. That's my presentation, and I can stand by for any questions.
Thank you very much, Admiral. I certainly appreciate you and bringing your knowledge. Let me ask the first question. What is the reason, and we all have been advised to eat the colors, the more colorful the food, the better, and to stay away from the processed foods, especially those things that are just white, like rice, and my favorite, which is grits. What is the reason that colored foods or foods with color have the things that we need most?
Because of the antioxidants are manifested in the pigment, and that's why I tell people how you cook really makes a difference. For example, if you overcook your potatoes and your skin breaks, all of a sudden the purple goes into the water. So now you're losing the anthocyanins into the water. That's why they tell you to only steam kale for 5 minutes, because they don't want you to lose the green in the kale, which is basically the sulforaphane. And so in essence, that's why it's in the pigments. So that's why the more colorful vegetables and fruits that you eat, the more antioxidants and the more nutrients you're going to get. One of the things that, for example, beta-carotene, I didn't talk about that because I didn't have time, but beta-carotene is very important. That's in your carrots and your sweet potatoes, etc. Okay, that's also good for your mental health, etc. In fact, they just did a study and found out that beta-carotene is critical to people who have ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. And so those are some of the things that, as well as, and so that's in the orange family, the turmeric, the beta-carotene, the carrots, etc. And so in essence, that's very good for the brain as well.
Okay. Now, is it better to eat raw vegetables and foods than cooked?
A combination is good. I eat both. In fact, they tell you to eat raw kale and cooked kale, because the raw kale has more of the sulforaphane, which is good for cancer. And then the cooked kale, of course, has the lutein and zeaxanthin. But there's a way to get around that, is that you can put mustard seed powder in the kale to get the sulforaphane. But both should be eaten.
Judy, are there any comments or questions in the chat room?
About the black pepper's effect on your colon?
Well, some people can't handle it, to be honest with you. So what I do is I use biopurin, which is the black pepper extract, and that tends to not be as hard on the colon.
Great. Then we have another question about what kinds of mushrooms are recommended, and would you have them cooked or raw?
You have to cook mushrooms because they have something in them that basically will cause you to, how can I say this? They aren't good for you raw. It's best to eat mushrooms cooked. It doesn't really matter hot in terms of the green tea and mushroom. Shiitake is good. I like shiitake. What I do is I get a mushroom blend. I get oyster mushrooms, shiitake mushrooms, as well as white button mushrooms, all in one. But you only need white button for the green tea regimen.
Okay. And one last one, if you can, Dr. Maxey, is for nuts, should you have raw or roasted nuts?
I eat my nuts raw. I eat walnuts, pecans, almonds, as well as my Brazil nuts raw. I eat them raw. If you could now, a lot of people can't eat nuts. Period. A lot of people are averse to eating nuts, so that's something you have to gauge on an individual basis. Now, peanuts, I wouldn't eat peanuts raw. I would cook the peanuts.
Then one final here. Do you recommend commercial smoothies with the ingredients in them?
I am a connoisseur. I'm sorry. If I do commercial, I tell them what I want in it, because it's high in sugar and high in what I consider to be crap. So if you look at mine, in other words, it will drive up your sugar level. So I eat whole sugar like dates, which will not drive up your sugar levels. Now, the other thing that I put in my smoothies is Ceylon cinnamon, which controls blood sugar. And so I put that in everything that's sweet. I put Ceylon cinnamon, which controls blood. And by the way, Ceylon cinnamon is also extremely high in antioxidants, and it's the only cinnamon that you can consume on a daily basis. You can't consume other cinnamon on a daily basis. It will eventually affect your blood.
Thank you. And there are a number of people requesting copies of your slides because you have so much great information. So if that's possible, please.
Yeah, I'll send it to you. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, David Brewer. I call you Doctor, my brother. I recall meeting you years ago, and I was so impressed uh, and watched you in your career. Uh, I understand that you did the ROTC program at Prairie View A&M, and the program is now named in your honor. And I don't know any other naval officer that has gotten to the level of vice admiral or 3 stars. So you're a hero to us. Thank you so much. We'll have plenty of questions for you later. I want to briefly talk about our statistics and what we have in front of us. We know that yesterday we had a bad news of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And I wanted to make sure that we recognize her and what she meant, not only to gender inequality, but to race and ethnic inequality. She was a true woman of talent, and I want to recognize the fact that she is important to our group, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And she, she was born, I need to talk to her. She was born March 15th of 1933. She died on September 18th of 2020 at the age of 87 years. She is an icon of our country, and we bid her to rest in peace. What I'd like to do also is talk about the total cases in the U.S. are at 6,706,374. We have 49,575 new cases that have occurred. The total deaths that occurred are 198 and 99. We're almost at 200,000, and we're expected to go above 300,000 within the next 30 to 60 days. There have been 983 new cases over the past day. The USA has a number of cases that's above 279, 681,000 in the last 7 days. So we do have a significant problem still. Having said that, I want to introduce the other speakers, and I'm very pleased that my brother that went to my church, I didn't think anybody knew about the AME Zion Church, but I was born in AME Zion, and so one of my presenters told me that he's a lifelong AME Zion member, and he is a graduate of the University of Tennessee. He's a board certified by the American Board of Emergency Medicine. He is the founder and director and Family Medicine Center in Woodbridge, New Jersey, and is currently the founder and chief medical officer of Self-Pay Medicine. Dr. Ken Steinmetz has become a friend and is a friend to the community, and I ask you to welcome him. Dr. Steiner, would you please take the floor?
Needs to unmute.
Dr. Steiner, please unmute.
Okay, we're unmuted now. Okay. Little echo there. Okay. Anyway, this is the presentation for is it flu or is it COVID? Question that comes up quite a bit. Do you have an echo on your side at all? No. Okay, good. So is it flu or is it COVID? That's the question that comes up quite often from patients, very, very frequently. And they're very, very similar. So we'd like to go through this today and learn more about it. But the important thing here to note is, as Dr. Maxey just said, that COVID is rapidly growing. And when we talk about flu, what I'd like to speak to is that maybe this year, for the first time, we're going to see very little flu. And that's because most of the flu originates in Southeast Asia and in Asia. And according to University of Chicago's computer modeling, they send out very early to the drug companies what we're going to expect this year. And we're seeing very little flu compared to the years before. And we think that's because people are wearing masks and social distancing because of COVID. So chances are very likely that if you see some of these symptoms early on, now more than ever, we should think COVID before we think anything else. So let's look at the similarities first. And as we know, they both are viruses that can give the same types of symptoms early on. And a lot of them may be vague, as you well know, and might have seen patients coming in complaining chills, headaches, sometimes very, very mild tiredness, fatigue, body aches, headaches are very, very common. And early on, they result in the same types of complications, just like having a cold. And there's a big tip off here, and we'll go to the next slide. But remember, when you see an elderly person or someone who's at risk with a comorbid condition, that could be anything from diabetes to immune disorders or lung disorders, especially asthma. Be very, very careful. And I'm speaking to folks that have families, that if you notice this in your families, make sure that you give them the attention more so than you maybe normally would. So let's go to the next slide here and talk about how they're different, because that's really at the crux of the matter. Flu starts very early after infection, 1 to 4 days. And COVID may take longer, 5 to up to 11, 12 days. Some folks say 15 days, 14 days. But the big tip off here, if you see someone who's lost taste and smell, and they're not feeling well, that's a huge clue that they have COVID. That person should be brought into medical attention right away, because there is nothing else we know that causes a flu-like symptom with loss of taste or smell. That's unique to COVID. The flu, most people get a minor infection and they start to get better and better. And it's good to get these people also to the doctor early, because there are 2 antiviral drugs out there that they can use that are somewhat effective. And of course, the flu has a vaccine. But when we turn to COVID, it's a different situation. There's no vaccine. There's no protection from it. And ideally, at this spot, the question that comes up right here often is, I'm worried I have COVID and I've been exposed to someone. Well, the key is that within 5 days, you can certainly develop symptoms, even within 3 days of being exposed to someone with COVID. Now, if you have been exposed to someone with COVID and you have any symptoms at all, you should get tested. And we're pounding the table here about testing. And if we had more time, I could share some stories with you about people who had someone in their home who they thought just had the flu and they came down with COVID. If they were tested a couple of days earlier, we could have jumped on it a lot sooner. But COVID is a very, very serious illness compared to flu. And for the docs on the panel that have treated patients with severe COVID, it's something like we've never seen before. And of course, it can cause blood clots in the lungs and the legs, almost anywhere in the body, including the brain. And often what we're seeing in patients is blood clots that are causing strokes. Additionally, we're seeing some very strange rashes. We see these rashes in kids that are similar to certain rare type flu type infections, but we're also seeing rashes like we've never seen before that are very nondescript. So if you have a family member, they're developing rashes or they're getting a headache, and most importantly, if they're not getting better, immediately bring them in to get tested and evaluated. And that includes children as well. We're seeing more and more kids being brought in that have COVID and aren't bouncing back as quickly as you might expect, especially the kids that have underlying illnesses, as we talked about, like asthma or diabetes especially. Those kids need special attention. So don't hesitate to be tested. You might ask, well, how are we going to know the difference between flu and COVID-19 if we bring them in? Well, there are two different tests to run for the flu virus and the COVID virus. As a matter of fact, right now there's several diagnostic companies, laboratory companies, that are releasing at this very moment combined tests. So right on the spot, you'll know if you have the flu or you have COVID. And the next question is, of course, can you have both at the same time? And we're just starting to see that, where people come in and they have the flu, but they're also testing very positive for COVID. So it's like any other illness. You can have two things at once. So really be on the lookout. But the chances are, if you're getting sick this year, especially, it's probably going to be COVID. Okay, what are the warning signs here of COVID? And the big tip off is trouble breathing. And that's how mostly people with COVID die. Their lungs fill up with fluid, and we can't get that fluid out very easily. It's very thick. And that's why you hear the cry for ventilators so often with very, very sick COVID patients. Its number one spot that it loves is the lungs. And so anyone who's on medications for their lungs, whether it be COPD, asthma, or other illnesses that can affect the breathing, especially heart disease, these folks need to be brought in early and evaluated. So testing. And now we probably do have the testing. I know we were told months and months ago that we had it. Well, it's finally arriving, and I can tell you most hospitals have it, and even most neighborhoods now have a way for you to get the test quickly. There's a lot of confusion around the COVID people. They'll seem to be not themselves, they'll report. They'll be somewhat confused, even disoriented at times. Those people should be brought immediately in for testing and evaluation. And if your nearest place for testing and evaluation is the ER, bring them in. And of course, if you see them having bluish lips or even their fingernails turning blue or what have you, those folks need to get oxygen quickly because COVID, as we said, it loves to strike the lungs. And that's its mainstay before it hijacks other body systems. And so it's real important to get these people oxygen as soon as we can. Having said that, COVID is new. We're seeing more and more types of symptoms that we've never seen before, especially in children. So be on the lookout for that. So basically, the message here is if someone has the flu or you think they have the flu, think COVID, not flu. And certainly if they say that the smell, and ask them, do things taste the same? And do they smell the same? If they say they can't taste or smell, chances are that person has COVID. Okay. And as we discussed, don't hesitate today to get to a healthcare provider. And that also means telemedicine or just picking up the phone. Most states have hotlines today. Or just call your nearest hospital and they'll put you in touch with the right people. There's no special number you really need to know to cry for help. And they will listen to you and direct you as to where you need to go for either testing or, if necessary, the care. So remember the warning sign about difficulty breathing. You don't have to call anyone. Go straight to the emergency room, call for help with that patient, and get that patient treated as quickly as possible, because that's the main killer of COVID today. Okay, we went through that quick and rapidly because I know I'm expecting some questions here to come up. So we'll turn it over to Dr. Maxey, and you can help us with the questions.
Dr. Tanner. Of course, I've got a twisted question for you. As an emergency room physician, let me pose a question. So I'm a 55-year-old man in a rural area. The nearest emergency room or hospital is a 2-hour drive. What can I do in that interim of seeking emergency care to alleviate what's going on? Are there any intermediate steps that I can take for my health? And I'm fatigued. I'm starting to get short of breath. What do I do?
Okay, if you're in the rural setting, you certainly try and get a hold of emergency medical services. That's your best help as far as for breathing. You can sit the person up in an upright position, and then you would make sure that their airway is clear also. And the idea is to get them as much oxygen and ventilation as you can. And don't waste time treating them so much. Start driving and get help. The biggest problem we see is people wait around for help, and sometimes help could take hours to get there, especially in a rural setting. And all the studies have shown, get them in a car and get them to where they can get help. So the answer there is really make sure the airway is clear and get them in the car as soon as you can to get some oxygen and proper treatment.
There's another patient who lives in an urban area. The hospital is 2 blocks away, but they're definitely afraid to go to an emergency room where there are a lot of people. And they might have the flu only, but they're afraid of getting COVID, but they have symptoms. Tell me advice to that person.
Okay, that's a great question, and we see this every day. Usually in most hospital situations, the family or whoever brought the person in is held outside the doors of the hospital. They don't want that person coming in and contracting COVID or giving it to people. And the patient is then taken immediately and evaluated according to the protocols they use in the hospital for isolation.
So, in listening to various videos, tapes, and podcasts, there is a certain message that is coming out that says the number of COVID cases and certainly the case fatality rate is very low. And we should not be giving up our freedom to stay locked in, to socially distance, or even to wear masks. That it doesn't make sense and it's messing with our freedom as citizens of America. Your response?
Well, I can answer that both politically and that's a great question. And as a physician, of course, we all know that wearing masks, social distancing, and also washing your hands quite frequently, and trying not to touch your face as often as you might have a habit about doing, those are all very, very helpful. In fact, one of the senior people at the CDC just said last week, perhaps masks are going to prove more effective than a vaccine. I think it's very irresponsible to say such things as not to wear a mask and not to social distance. It's also inconsiderate. You know, it's the kind of thing, if you want to put yourself in harm's way, go ahead. But you have no right to do that to other people. It's inconsiderate at the very least and irresponsible. So everyone listening, follow the CDC guidelines today, which is pushing more testing. For example, just up until yesterday, if you were near someone that had COVID, you didn't necessarily have to have testing. Today, they changed it and said testing is working. So if you're exposed to anyone who had COVID recently within the last 2 weeks, go get tested. Okay.
Judy, are there any questions in the chat box?
Yes, we have several questions. The first is, since we're wearing masks and washing our hands, maybe there's no need for a flu vaccine this year?
That's a good question. Well, there's still, I have to walk the line of the government and say that they're asking everyone to also get a flu vaccine that can get one, especially the elderly and people at risk. But having said that, we talked about getting infected with both the COVID virus and the flu virus. We haven't seen much of that combination yet. But chances are, if you have the flu and then you're hit with COVID, that's going to be far more serious for you than if you had COVID alone. The stress on the immune system is going to be overwhelming. So I would suggest to follow the CDC guidelines even today and get the flu shot today.
What are the rates and risks of reinfection?
Okay, that's still up in the air. That's a great question. We're starting to see it. Some of the best studies were done in the Army, where they're following these people closely. I don't have the answer for that, and I don't think the government can safely say what percentage of people are going to get COVID twice or 3 times. But having said that, I'm not convinced yet that they're getting the same COVID. We might be seeing slightly mutated forms of it as a second and third type of infection, because we're not analyzing them specifically, each type of COVID infection, to make sure it hasn't mutated. So having said that, there are mutated forms around the world today, in Europe and in the Far East.
Okay, the next question, many doctors are seeing emergency patients from prisons. What is your protocol for people coming in that are homeless or under police custody that are seeking treatment?
Yeah, every patient in every emergency room in the United States that's licensed should be treated equally and the same. So those folks who are prisoners, homeless, etc., even prior to COVID, always in my career, were treated the same as if the president came to the, well, not this president, but if the president came into the emergency room.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions for now, Dr. Maxey.
Okay, thank you. Sorry for that one.
Dr. Maxey, we can't hear you well.
Can you hear me now?
That's better.
Yeah, they're much better.
Trying to be cool. I wasn't trying to be loud. So, doctor, one other question. There is a syndrome being noted months later from people who were COVID positive. And they're no longer COVID positive, but they have severe fatigue. They
Yeah.
just get back to their baseline. What do we recommend to follow that type of patient?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Maxey. That's being talked about. I think they're called the long haulers right now. Those folks, there are more and more, and what we call that is the morbidity or the chronic illness created by COVID. And most often it's a physical illness. It doesn't seem to mostly be affecting the mental system or your thinking. But these folks, they either have a limb that's weak, or they have chronic fatigue, as if someone had chronic fatigue syndrome, and they're feeling a sense of being tired all the time and not back to themselves. And I'm sure that many people listening know someone, either a friend or relative, who's saying the same thing to them. And since COVID is so new, it may take years to get back from COVID. And so there's a lot of investigations right now going on into this very subject to make sure that the folks that seem to be chronically fatigued from COVID, that we do enough studies on them to figure out why are they chronically fatigued while others bounce right back. Great question.
Thank you so much. I'm going to call on the chairman of our executive advisory committee, Mr. Carl Brooks, former executive leadership council, Mr. Brooks. Okay. Um, if you can unmute, let me know.
I have our announcement, Dr. Maxey. Okay, I'm a proud member of the Black Health Trust family, and our mission is to provide credible information and insight for our communities so that they can have expert advice. We are so grateful to the numerous health professionals that have donated their time to this dynamic Sunday program. And to continue with this program, we need your support. And we're asking you to please consider a donation to Black Health Trust by going to our website at blackhealthtrust.org. You can make your donation there, and we appreciate it and thank you in advance.
Thank you so much, Judy. I appreciate so much the healthcare professionals and uh, physicians and scientists that have given of their time to give information to our communities, especially communities of color. It would be very good. I don't know much about social media, but I know it's important that if this program has been useful to you and the other programs have been useful to you, that you need to like the program. You need to, there's a little button that has thumbs up. If you be good enough to like it, that's very important to us as we seek funding to handle our production as we go. In addition, we're going to be rolling out something next week called the Black Health Trust Association, in which you can become a member, and there'll be certain benefits that come along with that. We want to, as our audience, as our advisors, and we want to grow this so we can reach as many people as possible, and therefore we need your help. The next speaker is very interesting. He's a personal friend of mine. I call him, in a friendly way, Dr. Einstein. And we've talked for months about there not being a cure for COVID. There's a lot of hesitancy about using vaccines. A lot of people don't trust vaccines. They don't trust the ingredients of the vaccine. And the jury is still out whether vaccines are good or not good. And we have a health advisory committee that's going to begin debating that this week and try to come forward with the best recommendation. But in the meantime, this gentleman, who is a scientist scholar, his name is Dr. Cooper Martin, who describes himself as a veteran engineer who just happened to go to medical school. He is a biomedical engineer, a graduate of the University of Southern California. He has over 45 years of experience in electrical engineering, biomedical engineering, medical device development. He is a specialist in artificial intelligence, machine intelligence, and deep learning neural networks. He is the CEO of Cardiometrics Medical Systems and a business partner of mine. And he has what we believe is not only a diagnostic cure. We talked about these tests taking 15 minutes and taking 3 days and 7 days to come back. Well, according to him, we can get answers in a much shorter time than that. If we have something that is not a pharmaceutical agent, is not a vaccine, and it holds promise, I'd like to have Dr. Cecil Motley, MD, PhD, take the floor for his presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Maxey. And I'm going to get ready to share my I hope Hope I'm being shared. Okay. Today I'm going to tell you about a tool that can have multiple benefits in this COVID-19 war. And I consider it a war. And in wars, you kill the enemy. And that's what our approach is for both preventive, treatment, and the diagnostics. We're going to use light to help us in this fight. Now, when I say light, I'm talking about ultraviolet light. As you can see in the electromagnetic spectrum, there's a region between X-rays and visible light that is referred to as ultraviolet light. And that light is generally not visible to humans, and it has its pros and cons. But we're going to show how we can use it currently to our advantage, and then how we're looking at treatments using it to be a rescue treatment for the virus, which can also be used in the clinical trials for the vaccines. Because without a rescue treatment, it can be very dangerous to participate in these vaccine diseases and vaccine trials that are double blind. One measure that I want to remind everyone of, most of you probably already know, is this thing of wavelengths. I'm going to be talking about various wavelengths. And the wavelength is essentially the peak-to-peak distance of the light that you're working with. Let me get you into the reality aspect of what we're talking about. This slide shows the complete electromagnetic spectrum that we're most accustomed to dealing with. There are ranges beyond radio on the left and beyond gamma rays on the right, but we won't discuss those. Those are in a highly research phase and not relevant to what we're talking about. We're talking about the guy with these sunglasses, the ultraviolet light, which gives you sunburn. It's absorbed by the skin. It's used in fluorescent tubes. And now we're going to try to use it to our advantage. If you look at the light spectrum from the sun, you see that there's visible in the middle, as infrared on your right, and all of those purplish bands are ultraviolet. Scientists have divided those bands into UVA, B, and C just for convenience of discussion. It's also referred to as near, extreme, and far UV light. Now, we're interested in the light that can kill the virus. And that has been well understood and proven that at 264 nanometers, which is 10 to the minus 9 meters, is the optimum UV wavelength to kill viruses as well as bacteria. And if you'll notice, it just barely penetrates the epidermis. And doing so, it poses a minimum amount of damage to keratinocytes. And so that's the wavelength that we're going to be concentrating on. Just for information, UVB is extremely dangerous. You see that it penetrates down to the dermis. You stay away from it. And UVA is way down into the dermis, almost to the hypodermis. So UV has its good elements and its bad elements. And you can see that penetrating through the skin to the deep areas is not very good. Okay. In addition to receiving ultraviolet light from the sun, we've got various ways to synthesize it. There's these arc devices, there's LEDs, there's the black lights that I'm sure people are familiar with. There's these arc bulbs, and believe it or not, tanning salons. Those tanning machines that people get in put UV on their skin to enhance the color by giving them a slight sunburn. Now, what we're interested in is how UV can attack the viruses. Well, what it does is it damages the RNA of their organism such that it can't duplicate, it can't replicate. That's extremely important. When we talk about killing a virus, we're really not killing it. We're inactivating it so that it can't replicate. And if it can't replicate, it eventually disappears. Now, this all happens because the light penetrates the, in the case of COVID-19, that lipid layer around the virus, and it gets into the RNA structure and changes it. Well, guess what? That's what the virus does to us. It gets into our DNA, into the cells, and it changes it to look like itself. And in doing so, it replicates rapidly. It's able to just multiply unbelievably fast. So we've decided to do unto it as it does unto us. And that's the part that's kind of derivative of my DOD, where you kill it. If it's the enemy, kill it. And so that's what we're up to. And you can see that the wavelength that does the most damage is in the UVC band. And again, it's 264 nanometers. Unfortunately, we don't want to use that band, that wavelength on humans. We want to move a little to the left to 222 nanometers, because that tends to be a compromise between killing the virus or inactivating it and providing minimum damage to human healthy tissue. This is from a lab experiment done by a colleague. You notice on the left, we have a large colony of a bacteria. And as you go to the right, you see that it slowly disappears. Well, that corresponds to increased dosages of ultraviolet light, far UVC. But you should also notice the levels. 10 millijoules is equivalent to like 0.017 watts. It's very, very, very low power, and it has very little damage that it does to the healthy tissue. So in that plot below, you see the dashed line is the damage that those dosages are having to healthy tissue, and on the solid line is showing the damage that it's having to this particular colony of bacteria. So down at the bottom, that's 10 to the minus 7 survival, which means you've got 1 in 10 million possibilities of survival at that particular dose level, which in this case is only 10 millijoules. Okay, let's get back to what we can do. as you've heard probably from all sorts of sources, they're using UV to sterilize surfaces. Well, these are some of the favored methods of doing so. On the left, you see these bags. Well, these bags have LED devices in them that give off UV at the right spectrum, at the right wavelength. And in those cases, it's 264 nanometers, the optimum wavelength to kill viruses and bacteria. The middle one is a wand. I'm sure you've seen people advertising these wands. Well, it's a similar thing going on, but you just put the wand over the surface that you're trying to sterilize for 5 to 10 seconds. And let me emphasize that it does not take long to kill COVID-19. 5 to 10 seconds exposed to UV, and it is completely deactivated. Now, if you're an institution, a church, big auditorium, and you want to sterilize your room that you're going to have people in, or have had people in, and you want to make sure that none of the virus remains, they have these large machines that, placed in the center of the room, will sterilize the room. But there are cautions. You can't be in the room when these large machines are being used. You can't have pets in the room, and you can't have plants in the room, or you cover the plants with some not too translucent material. And plastic works quite well. UV does not penetrate plastic well at all. In fact, it's a very good filter. The pros and the cons. Clearly, bacteria and viruses can be wiped out to a 99% level. This is well established. The Department of Homeland Security, I think it was Byron, proved this. He actually set up a situation where he could show that this light would take out these viruses 99%. And if you may recall, our president commented on using UV light in a human to get rid of the virus. And he said, have those doctors look at that. Well, he was a little late with that. We have been looking at this for a very long time and just brought it to the forefront when this pandemic started. The optimum medical wavelengths to use is 222 nanometers. A lab in Japan did an extensive study on the various wavelengths that are effective with minimum harm to healthy tissue, and they came up with 222 nanometers. The wavelength that's most effective is 264 nanometers, but I do not recommend that you do that around humans in an open environment. Again, they're effective within 5 to 20 seconds. If you expose this stuff to 20 seconds of 264, it's gone. All right. Far UVC devices, both off the shelf and custom, can be scalable to any area that you want to treat. And there are various devices, like I mentioned before, that are off the shelf. Now let's talk about the cons. There's never any free lunch. You always got a problem that using something new is going to expose. We know well, this is well known, that far UVC is carcinogenic and mutagenic in high doses. And that's why people have been reluctant to use it in medical treatments. My background is 23 years of using ultraviolet light for things in the Department of Defense. everything from communication in dense fogs and high foliage to communications under the water between submarines. High levels of far UV radiation requires skin protection. So if you're going to be in these high dose areas, you need to be completely covered, or else you're going to get a slight burn, which could go from slight to severe, and long-term use could cause skin cancer. Far UVC intensities are difficult to control, but we have a solution for that. We're going to let a technology that you've all heard of called artificial intelligence regulate the intensities such that they do not harm the patient. And most important, far UVC requires eye protection, which is misspelled, by the way. And this can be in the form of sunglasses. And if you're going to be in a high dose area, there are special glasses that are made to protect your eyes from far UVC. The danger in your eyes being exposed to far UVC is you'll get cataracts. And I'm sure no one wants to deal with that. Okay, now we're going to talk about more of the future of what UVC can do for us in the form of medical devices. With the risk of being a little too technical, I want to explain something about what we call Rhemon scattering. And this is the process where I shine a light on a microorganism or bacteria, and it absorbs that energy that I shine on it and gives me back a different set of wavelengths based on this molecular structure. And this is called Rhemon spectroscopy. The pictures at A and B that you see on the left, that is a healthy blood sample. It has been illuminated with a particular frequency of light, and you see the spikes there. Those are perfectly normal because we've done the blood analysis to verify that that spectrum is for a clean blood sample. On the right, E. coli. Notice that it is very easy to distinguish between a healthy blood sample and one that has been infected with E. coli. Well, that's the trick that we want to use for a point of care testing system. And point of care means you test the person right there and you get the results in near real time. Dr. Maxey, myself, Dr. Williams, we believe we've come up with a point of care testing system that will give you a positive or negative results of having the virus within less than 20 seconds. And again, at the risk of getting too technical, let me just briefly tell you how it works. We have a UV source that generates a frequency that COVID-19 fluoresces the best at. In other words, it absorbs the most of that light and emits the most spectrum resulting from its molecular structure. We use a spectrometer, and this is a machine that will give you that picture that we just previously looked at. It'll tell you what the various wave numbers are of the microorganism. We connect that with a computerized system that connects to a cell phone. That cell phone transmits that spectrometer information to a, what we call a server farm, or it's a remote location with loads of supercomputers that execute artificial intelligence algorithms. So instead of a person having to look at B and say, gee, okay, there's the virus, there it is, it's a positive. Instead of them having to look at that and make a visual judgment based on their knowledge of the spectrum of the organism, we let artificial intelligence look at that. And when it looks at it, it takes maybe 4,000 or 5,000 samples of that waveform and determines whether it fits the structure that the artificial intelligence network has been trained to identify. And that's a key point, trained to identify. Okay. That is the basic point of care testing system that we're developing. Given that, the thought was, well, with all the micro technology that we have, why can't we put all of that stuff in a small device? And we're calling it a wand. And that small device links up to a cell phone through a Bluetooth link. It does everything that the system on the left does, but it's a very small device about the size of a tongue depressor. And you put it in your mouth, on your tongue, point it to the back of your throat, and in about 10 seconds, it takes the readings. In about another 10 seconds, you will get the feed report back from the server farm, whether what it saw was the virus or not. And it's very easy to detect the virus in that way because the ACE2 receptors are right back there, and they'll indicate without any problem whether you have the virus or not.
Dr. Martin, may I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
How can this be agent to actually treat the lung disease?
Well, can you speak a little louder? I'm having a hard time hearing you.
I said, how can this type of system be used to treat the lung disease in a seriously ill patient?
What kind of diseases? Lung?
Lung disease, when COVID gets in.
Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. We're going to go to that next. But let me just say this one thing before we do that. These devices can be tuned to detect any kind of bacteria or virus, not just COVID-19. All I have to do is retrain the artificial network, the artificial intelligence network, to recognize a different pattern, spectral pattern. And that will allow it to identify some future disease or any other type of bacteria or virus that we're dealing with. Now let's talk about how we can use this to treat the virus. As you know, the lungs are the prime problem when it comes to this disease. It gets into the lungs, it starts to replicate, the alveoli lose their emphasis. It just takes over. And I was going to show pictures of what that looked like in real life from photographs, but I thought it was a bit gross for most people because it looks like just giant clumps of nodules taking over your airways in your lungs. Now, let's talk about how we're going to treat this. We currently are holding the patent on a method that we refer to as UV neb or nebulization. And here's the concept. We know that light around 222 nanometers at very, very low energy levels will inactivate the virus. The challenge is, how do we get it in the lung airways? How do we do that? Well, there's, of course, a well-known medical treatment to get things into your lungs, deep lungs, called nebulization. What it does is it takes the liquid and it essentially blows air through it to make it into a fog. And you inhale that fog and it gets deep into your lungs. Well, if that fog can get deep into the lungs, I can apply a little physics to this. We know that shining light in a fog causes scattering. In other words, the light propagates in all different directions. So if the patient is inhaling this fog, I can illuminate that fog with my far UVC, and it will get all down into the deep parts of the lungs. And so I'm using the UV nebulized solution to carry light, this far UVC light, down into the deep parts of the lung. Well, fortunately, based on my studies with underwater communications using UV, salt solutions are ideal. So we would use a dense salt saline solution, nebulized to create this fog while the person is inhaling from a pressure mask or from an endotracheal device. And that will carry the light into their airways and deep lungs. That's the basis of how to treat this without pharmaceuticals or any other chemical, thing, or no swabs, and none of the other stuff they're using for testing. Now, the trick is not to over-radiate the lungs. Like I say, very low levels are effective in inactivating these viruses. But you can't run an open loop system. In other words, you just can't guess, okay, I'm sending enough light into this mess for it to get where it's supposed to get. And I'm not hurting anything while I'm doing it. Well, that's where the previous device that we just talked about, we embed that into the system. There's a spectrum analyzer, and there's the variable wavelength UV source. So as we are nebulizing and applying the light to get down into the lungs, we're simultaneously monitoring what the intensity is and what the effect on the virus is. When the virus is inactivated, its spectrum is going to change, and we know to stop. No longer irradiate the lungs. We're done. Okay. That's the basis of our treatment. Now, look at all of this equipment that's associated with this. All of these pieces of equipment are off the shelf. Mechanical ventilators for pushing the fog down, computers, UV sources, spectrum analyzers, nebulizer compression, nebulizing cups. All of this stuff is available. We're just going to integrate it together. But the thing that is not available is the artificial intelligence algorithms that are running on this computer. We have to generate those algorithms and train them to recognize the pathogen that we're trying to treat. Okay. I think I'm done, and I thank you for your attention. And we're currently preparing to do clinical trials on the treatment and the point of care testing, and we will keep everyone up to date.
Thank you so much, Dr. Motley. I certainly appreciate your very, very astute presentation. I do have a question before we go to Judy in the chat box. From a practical sense, if this is approved through phase 3, how soon can we have this, and will it be better than a vaccine? I think you're muted. Please unmute Dr. Motley. Simon?
Yeah, okay, we're good. The actual treatment system could be available within about 4 months. But the problem that we've got is this treatment system involves things with the human body that could or could not be a safety problem. So we need to prove the safety of this first. And we plan to prove the safety of this with animal trials and then a limited number of humans. So our plan right now is to, within 6 months, be able to say that this is safe to use on humans and that it has efficacy. In other words, we're going to take infected patients that have already contacted the virus and try to eliminate the virus in their airways. And remember, this is a lung treatment. This is not a heart treatment or liver or otherwise. We're trying to get this stuff out of the lungs so your body has a chance to heal or you be cured the other ways for heart or liver or kidney problems. We believe that within 6 months, we can prove the safety and efficacy and then go on to phase 2 clinical trials, which involves hundreds of people, and phase 3 involves thousands of participants.
Okay. I encourage everyone on the line to put questions in the chat box that our host will read.
Can't hear you, Dr. Maxey.
I encourage everyone to put their questions or comments in the chat box that our host will read. Are there any current questions for Dr. Motley?
Yes. First question we have is, you mentioned bacteria and viruses. What difference is there in danger?
Okay, bacteria, when irradiated with far UVC, it just kills it. It's just a dead organism once that light hits it. Viruses, you can't kill the way you can a bacteria. What you do is inactivate them. And inactivation means that they're no longer viable. In other words, they can't reproduce. And by not having the ability to reproduce, their viability quickly diminishes and they go away. It's just that simple. And all of this is well known. But we didn't discover this yesterday. This is very well known. But the challenge has been, how do you get the UV light inside the lungs airway structures without harming the patient and getting it to distribute to the deep lungs? And we think our nebulization scheme, creating that fog, is the method to do that.
Thank you. The next question is, how is the light nebulized? Is the light transmitted onto an inert liquid or air fog?
It's, you create this fog, and then you take what we call a light ring. It's a ring of light wrapped around the hose that's providing the air and the nebulized fog, and you light up the fog. You literally light it up.
Okay, thank you. One more question. Can you project that last slide? Someone asked also, how would you treat patients who do not present with respiratory symptoms?
Well, let me just say this, and again, we're not trying to give any medical advice here, but if I contacted it and I've been tested and I immediately know I've got the infection before I have any symptoms, I would immediately go on the nebulization treatment, but with a pressure mask. It is no reason to go to an endotracheal device at that point because you're not in any symptomatic distress. However, if you hit it right before it starts to migrate over the rest of your body, you have a chance of totally eliminating it. Just like waving a wand over a surface and getting rid of the virus, you are literally doing the same thing inside the lung airways. So as quick as possible, after you know that you've been infected, get rid of it. Kill it right there. Don't wait.
We do know that the severity of the virus is based upon the volume or weight of the virus that is exposed to. So we know that the dose response curve, this is that, am I correct?
Okay, I had a little trouble here. But
Hard to hear you, Dr. Maxey.
Okay. I'm saying we do know that the severity of the infection is based upon the load of virus that you're exposed to. Does getting rid of that load by exposing the virus to this UV light, as you just explained, is it consistent with lowering that load and therefore lowering the risk of further?
right. Okay. As you and other physicians know, that the reason they tell you not to congregate in large populations is because you run the risk of getting a very large load of the virus. If 2 or 3 people in that area have the virus, you get a larger load, and that load starts in your nasal cavity and in the back of your throat. That's what it hits, or it gets in through your eyes. But the most common way is you inhale it, and the H2 receptors get hit with it right away. And if you can do something to keep it from migrating any further, that's the solution. Okay.
Any other questions in the chat box?
That's it for now on this topic.
So let's go to Mr. Brooks able to unmute yet?
Say again, please, Dr. Maxey.
Mr. Brooks available yet?
Hello there, Randall.
Go ahead, Mr. Brooks.
Good. I'm Carl Brooks, and I'm the chair of the steering committee. And I've talked in the last couple of weeks about the need for voting. There has never been a greater need for voting in our history. Over the last several weeks, we've just seen disasters occurred with marches and with police violence. We've got to vote as though our lives depend on it, because they do. With the passing of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, it's even more important that we have somebody who will appoint the right justices to the Supreme Court, and that they don't undo various programs, Obamacare and other things which have been approved. We need your help. We need your help also from a financial point of view. For the past 5 months, without interruption, we've shown through Black Health Trust these amazing programs, these super doctors and professionals presenting their information. We can't continue to do it without financial support. We need to increase our staffing. We need to provide our technical equipment. We need to do all the things that we need to do to go forward. And we don't want to stop presenting these programs at the end of the COVID, which we hope will come soon, but we want to continue to provide this level of information and quality to the brothers and sisters in this country. The only way that we can do this is we need your help. On our website is information on how to donate, and we'll be beefing up that information to give you more alternatives on how to support this wonderful program. Thank you very much in advance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brooks. Let's go back to our panel. And again, I'm going to thank you for the information that you have shared today. I want to ask more questions and generate more discussion. Please use the chat box for our audience to put in questions and our comments. Dr. Admiral Brewer, Dr. Amy Zion Steiner, Dr. Einstein. I'm a cook, so I have made some delicious Caribbean, Jamaican fish soup. What should I put in that? Should I put some elderberry? Should I put some vitamin D? What are the things that I need that I can put in my diet again this week? Do that, Edmund Brewer, some of the things, and tell me a little bit how they work. What are the 4 or 5 most important things I can do with my diet? Thank you.
Dr. Brewer, we can't hear you. Please unmute.
Okay, now I'm unmuted. Okay, got it. I couldn't hardly hear the question from Randall. What was he saying?
He's saying that what are the 4 or 5 most important things I can add to my diet today? And tell me what elderberry syrup tastes like.
Elderberry syrup actually tastes pretty good. The thing I would add to my diet right now, to be honest with you, that the average American does not have in their diet is purple sweet potatoes. And so I mean, you know, our ancestors ate a lot of potatoes, especially sweet potatoes. And so I would add purple sweet potatoes. That's number 1. So I would go to the rainbow. In other words, I would go purple, orange, and yellow. And so the turmeric is the sort of the orange with the regular sweet potatoes, purple sweet potatoes, and of course green. Cruciferous vegetables. I would eat everything on that list that I had in terms of cruciferous vegetables. I mean, that's just automatic. And I think once you put all those together between the anthocyanins, the curcumin, the Beta-Carotene, and everything, I call it stall. For a man, I call it stall Z, STALLZ. Sulforaphane, which is cruciferous vegetables, turmeric, anthocyanins, lignans, which are flax seeds, lycopene, which is tomato paste, and Z is zinc, because you need those for as a man, you need those for your prostate. And so for the ladies, you should do all of that, as well as the green tea and the mushrooms. But remember, cook the mushrooms because they have hydrazines in them, which can be a little toxic.
Okay. What in your product is vitamin D in what you suggest?
I put vitamin D in, as you saw, I put vitamin D in my elderberry, and I take about 5,000 units of vitamin D a day, minimum. One of the things that they were able to show in that COVID-19 study is they actually went way higher than that in terms of therapeutic dose for fighting COVID-19. It was called, I'll have to remember the exact name, but when vitamin D is converted into something called a diol. And so once it's converted, it basically it regulates the immune system. And that's what people miss about vitamin D. It actually regulates your immune system, and it helps your immune system fight. Even if you're a cancer patient, you should be very heavy in vitamin D. One of the reasons that African Americans have a higher morbidity rate because of COVID-19, and they're beginning to correlate this, is that 80% of us are deficient in vitamin D. And so you know, get a good supplement. If you can't get a good supplement, do like we used to do when I was a little boy. Your mama lined you up and gave you some cod liver oil. You're muted.
You muted, Randall.
Dr. Mancy,
Yeah, he's still muted.
he's trying to get unmuted.
Yeah.
Our technician will mute him shortly.
Okay.
Did one of the other speakers want to add some comments at this time? Dr. Steiner or Dr. Motley?
Yes, this is Dr. Motley. I posed a question on the chat earlier. When we prepare our green vegetables, whether it's collard greens, turnip green, green peas, whatever, we always cook it in beer. And doing that, it seems to retain its color quite well. And it kind of adds to the taste of the vegetable. Is there any known benefit to that, or is that just something I got from my elders from the way they used to cook vegetables?
I think you got that from your elders, but that's good enough. But you know, as I said, if you can retain the pigment in your foods, whether it's the purple sweet potatoes, then the purple in there, whether it's the greens, as I said, you can't cook kale more than 5 minutes because you want to maintain that pigment. The antioxidants are in the pigment. So if you can retain the pigment, then in essence, you are retaining the antioxidants and the nutrients. And so that's what happens with a lot of us. We end up overcooking food. But, you know, back in the day, what did we say? If you cook those greens for hours and hours and hours, what did they tell you to do? Get the pot liquor.
Drink the pot liquor, right?
was the juice.
Yes.
And realized that the juice is where the nutrients were. And,
Yes.
you know, the old folks knew what they were doing.
Yeah. My elders would always give me what they call the pot liquor.
That's right. Pot liquor.
Cold or something, or got kind of sick, they would give me the pot liquor.
Well, I think cooking beer, it sounds like you really got, quote, the liquor with the pot.
Right.
Pot liquor is very good unless you have kidney disease. It's very high in potassium. So with that proviso, I love pot liquor, but people who have kidney failure or kidney damage should be very careful about the pot liquor. And we have to find a way not to have that high potassium in their diet.
Right.
Very good. Dr. Steiner, and I'm trying to get them to unmute my other phone, which has better sound than my computer. If Simon can unmute my phone, trying to get in. I'm concerned that until Dr. Motley's product comes online, until the hospital is available to our patient, what are some of the things? I've heard people asking for Z-Paks and zithromycin, for vitamin D. What type of interim non-hospital treatment or even hospital treatments are currently available since we right now have no particular cure that we know of for COVID?
Good question. What was brought up here, the vitamin D, is the real key to helping the immune system ward off this virus. More and more studies are coming out supporting the use of vitamin D. So most of us are deficient in vitamin D, and especially the minority communities. So that was well pointed out here. So people listening, if you have kids or yourself, definitely you can take the recommended dosage of vitamin D. It's also available by prescription, high dose once a month. So should you have a plan that covers your medications, you might want to pick it up that way. And then all the CDC does is recommend the usual medications that we use for getting the common cold to try and relieve symptoms, but that doesn't really help a whole lot long term. We don't know how effective that's going to be with COVID. So right now, vitamin D is what I do, and eat well, sleep well. People don't speak enough to that. We're all feeling the stress of this illness around us. And I think if we do more to relieve stress on ourselves and those near us, and eat properly and sleep properly, probably that'll do more than anything else. Whoops, I think we have you. Let me mute.
Any questions in the chat box?
Yes, there are quite a few questions and comments. Let me see here. Second. Okay, here we go. What about assisting the body of cleansing the inflammation? I guess that's directed to you, Dr. Motley.
Okay. Dr. Max and I have discussed this. Once we have inactivated the virus, there's a need to get that stuff, which is going to turn into fluid, out of your lungs. And he has recommended putting the patient on their stomach and, doing the vibratory type actions on their back to get it out of their lungs. If that is not successful, you may have to aspirate any fluid formed by needle. And that's not a comfortable thing to consider, but it is life-saving. So once you kill this stuff in your lungs, there's debris, so to speak, kind of left, and you have to get that debris out by either draining it or agitating it out, or even in worst case, inserting a needle and aspirating it out of the lungs.
So, Dr. Motley, along with that question, I think the question was asking about the microbiome or the bacteria that are normally part of the gastrointestinal tract. I'm thinking that there are good bacteria in the gastrointestinal tract and bad bacteria. If you were able to know what those bad bacteria are, is there a way, and I'm not talking about mechanism yet, that we could arrest those bad bacteria and effectively get rid of the pathogens in the gut?
Yes, remember that each one of these bacteria or viruses has a resonant frequency, so to speak. In other words, there's one wavelength that makes it fluoresce more than any other wavelength. And if you can locate that wavelength, which you could probably do in the lab, that would help you identify uniquely, in the presence of multiple pathogens, of multiple microorganisms or bacteria, you could specifically target that one bacteria or virus and not hurt the others. But you have to find that frequency. And we don't have a handbook that we can look up right now and say, use this frequency for influenza and use this for COVID-19. But in the laboratory, that could be established. And while we're in clinical trials with the treatment, that would be a good thing to determine.
Yeah, a few years ago, one of my friends, the gastroenterologist, Dr. Donald Henderson, showed me a pill that you could take. And by taking this pill, which is actually an electronic television camera, it would go all the way down the gut and photograph everything there. That means that you could probably put UCV lights in that and accomplishing what we want. And then
Yeah,
in the chat box read.
right.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead, Dr. Mark.
My old alma mater, USC, has come up with nanoparticles that they inject into the blood, and they use tattoo ink to trace them. And they can find out exactly where the nanoparticles are going, or in some cases, direct those nanoparticles to the organs or areas that you want. That information of how that works is on the internet now. But my guys back at USC in the biomedical engineering department developed that, and they're actively trying to get it FDA approved. And that could do exactly what you're talking about.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's go to the next question.
Okay, there's something about elderberry revving up the immune system too much, which contributes to the cytokine storm. Is there anything to that?
There's been some research on that. Initially, they thought that that was indeed the case. Now they're not so sure, especially if you add vitamin D to it, because remember, vitamin D is an immune regulator, immune system regulator. So, but I would still caution people not to necessarily do it, because you don't want to overreact. You do not want your immune system to overreact and go to a cytokine storm and attack your body. But I will present some additional research on that says that maybe not so fast with elderberry syrup, because it depends on what you have in it too. I mean, all elderberry syrup is not created equal, especially if you're putting Manuka honey in it. Manuka honey is, if you didn't hear anything I said today, two things: vitamin D, Manuka honey. Manuka honey is phenomenal. We have not. My mother's 100 years old. That smoothie recipe that y'all saw is what she drinks every day, and so we have not had a cold or the flu in 8 years, simply because we do black seed oil, Manuka honey, green tea, etc. We have not had a cold or the flu in 8 years, and so I'm just a strong proponent of elderberry syrup.
Very good. Thank you so much. And we're saying that the remedies that you have are more preventative. Is that correct?
Say what now?
The remedies, the elderberry syrup, the Manuka honey, these are more preventative.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. But except for one thing, if you have an autoimmune disease like lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, etc., you should probably stay away from elderberry syrup, because again, you want your immune system to stay regulated but not overreactive. So there is a caution on elderberry when it comes to those autoimmune diseases.
Okay, very good. Judy?
There's a question, how valuable is purple cabbage?
Very valuable. Anything in the purple category, as you saw with my Purple Passion blend, you can throw some purple cabbage in there because it has the anthocyanins in it. It just doesn't have as high, but it has other. See, the thing about using multiple foods like that is it's not just that one nutrient. It has multiple nutrients in it. For example, the berries, actually will also help with memory, as opposed to, say, the purple sweet potatoes, even though both of them still fight cancer. But berries are good. We used to have the saying, and I know I'm going to get a rise out of Dr. Motley on this, and Randall, the blacker the berry, the sweeter the juice. So that has other connotations, but that is in essence what that meant. That it was the blacker the berry, the more nutrients, and the better the flavor. So the darker the cabbage, I don't know what to say with that, but it's good.
Good. Well, my comment is, I guess I'm pretty sweet. Are there any questions in the chat box again, Judy?
Yes, we have a two-part question. Could a lower far UVC wavelength at 205 to 210 nm be used for a longer period of time, but would be safer to the skin tissue? And could you use this system by placing a catheter into the heart that would eradicate its interior walls? I'm sorry, irradiate the interior walls to inactivate the virus?
Okay, let me address this way. We have a thing called an infection-resistant catheter. Dr. Maxey and I hold the patent on that. What it does is it irradiates the walls, surfaces of the catheter so that you don't get this biofilm infection from things like central venous catheters or indwelling catheters. That is very effective for bacteria. We haven't looked at it with regards to viruses. It probably is effective for viruses. But remember, the problem with the COVID-19 thing is how it compromises your lungs so quickly, and you're unable to breathe. So a catheter in the lungs would be, to me, a bit drastic and really not necessary, because the nebulized fog is going to take the UV light all through your lungs. And a catheter, remember, you would have to thread it through the various bronchi to get to where you want it. I think the people at Cedars Sinai and USC have been looking to see whether putting a down the trachea is effective for delivering the light. Now, as far as the wavelength, bacterias, viruses, or any of these microorganisms have magic wavelengths that they like to absorb the most light from. So just going to a higher wavelength, which would be down below 180, may not be a solution. You're trying to get the bacteria or virus to absorb the energy from the light and damage the RNA of the microorganism. So there are magic bullets, so to speak, wavelength-wise, that affect various types of viruses. There's no one magic bullet that kills everything equally. But I don't think a person would have to be on a pressure mask delivering the UV light for more than a few hours, and they would be clear. Their lungs would be clear.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions, Judy?
Yes, can the device, the UV device, be used in children?
Of course, yeah, that's the dose would probably be low. But children, sure.
Dr. Maxey, we can't hear you. Please unmute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, Dr. Steiner, tell me about the use of antibiotics in viruses versus bacteria.
Okay, you know,
Dr. Steiner.
yes, can you hear me?
He's on.
Yes? Okay.
Yes, we can hear you, Dr. Steiner.
Okay. Yeah, antibiotics are primarily used for bacterial infections, as we know. But there are some studies out there that show that if you use an antibiotic in the face of a viral infection, that the patient will get better quicker. And the thought is that there's a secondary bacterial infection running along with the initial insult of a viral infection. So having said that, once in a while, if I have a real bad sick patient, I do use an antibiotic if I feel it's still a viral, primarily a viral infection. In the case of COVID, there are still folks that feel that using azithromycin or other antibiotics, but especially azithromycin, even along with some other medications, may shorten the course of COVID. And what I think we're seeing in some of those small studies that show that it's effective is that, just like with the common flu, in a subset of people, it seems to help them. But if you have a viral infection and there's a specific antiviral, especially with COVID, remdesivir being the lead right now, an antiviral, that's what is the thing to use primarily. And those folks, along with anti-inflammatory medications, which is probably a little beyond the scope of this, but that includes the IL inhibitors, et cetera, as in addition to high-dose steroids. Those seem to, block what we used to think was a cytokine storm, and now looks like it starts with beta-carotene in the vessels. But it's still, all those IL blockers and the steroids are effective. And that brings down the inflammation, which is really the mode at which COVID kills us. I might say primarily by the lungs. And if you ever seen a patient actually drowning from a COVID infection where they can't breathe, it's devastating. And that's why I say in the talk that I gave, the first signs of shortness of breath, immediately get them to the emergency room and get them checked out for COVID as well. Chances are can present that way often.
Dr. Steiner or any of the other speakers, can you comment on the use of zinc?
Well, yeah, I think that's in my wheelhouse here. As I said, the treatment of any of these flu viruses, people say high dose vitamin C and zinc. There's been some studies that prove that they might help to an extent. And so that's why the CDC and all says you might want to try and use any of the available over-the-counter medications for the flu as a palliative treatment to try and help you get by the first day or two. But if you're not getting better, you better get checked out right away.
Well, thank you. Judy, anything else in the chat box? Are there any other questions in the chat box? I think you may be muted. I think you may be temporarily muted. Okay, very good. I'm going to say thank you to all of our speakers for the information that they gave. I'm going to ask each speaker to give a final comment in just a moment, but I want to encourage everybody to support the Black Health Trust. If you're so moved, give us a thumbs up and like this transmission. And we would like to have your contact information so we can include you on some of the things that we're doing, including the Black Health Trust Association and the second opinion expert, which is going to be introduced in the next 2 weeks. We certainly would appreciate you staying with us on that. Starting with Admiral Brewer, and then Dr. Steiner, and then Dr. Cecil Motley. I'd like to have a last word and comment from each of you.
Well, first of all, Randall, thanks for inviting me to participate. I've been on this Zoom call for quite a few weeks. I just was happy to share with everyone, my life experience in terms of nutrition. And again, as long as you're eating a rainbow, you're going to be fine, and pigments count. And so I see a lot of people asking that question. So just eat the rainbow, eat mostly plant-based. One final point about meat, and that is one of the things we do still eat some meat, but I eat mainly wild-caught salmon. But do not eat meat cooked at high temperatures because they create something called heterocyclic amines, HCAs, which are carcinogenic. So all meats that I eat are 300 degrees or less in terms of cooking. That's my panel.
Excellent. Thank you. I'm going to share an emotion that Simon had. I'm a little bit older than him, but I'd like to fly in an F-15 at some point. Maybe you can arrange that for me, Edmund. Dr. Steiner.
Okay, thank you. First, Dr. Maxey, I'd like to thank you and all the great presenters here today. It's terrific. As far as COVID, the minority community has been affected adversely by this more so than any other communities, and that goes for children as well. And I think now is the time, we say and get out and vote, but I think now is the time to get out and get tested if you think you've been exposed. That's one of the messages I really want to drive home. Get tested if you think you've had an exposure so that you don't infect other people and they can take care of you earlier than not taking care of you earlier. And I think we'll all get through this together real soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Steiner. I sure appreciate it. And a question or not a question, is there any value in the juice that we have for communion that is Welch's at the AMA Zion Church? Is that curative?
Yes, that's curative. God bless you. You're terrific.
It's purple, right?
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah.
Okay. Dr. Cecil Motley.
Okay. Thanks again for allowing me to present probably knowledge that most people don't know about ultraviolet light. I hope it was educational and know how to deal with it and protect yourself and use it to your advantage, especially using the products that are off the shelf, like the baskets and wands, and if you've got a large area, the larger machines. And again, thank you, Dr.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Einstein and Dr. Motley. I appreciate your presentation. We're just about out, but I'd like to again appeal for you to go to our website, blackhealthtrust.org. All of our talks from all of our previous Sundays are archived there. The bios and qualifications of our speakers are also there. And again, I'd like to thank them so much for their time. We appreciate you very much, and don't forget to give us a thumbs up. Thank you very much. Make sure you vote. Have a good day. Thank you.
God bless you. Thank you.